My name is Mark Ashford, and I am the CEO at Transform International. Transform have been around for over 2 years now. And in that short space of time, we've made a real tremendous impact on the recruitment world. But actually, we're actually taking things to the next level. And Youssef, if you can click onto the next slide for me. The reason why we're taking things to the next level is because we're hosting an event, the first of its kind. On the 18th of January, we're having an SEND Recruitment Summit. And the reason why this is the first of its kind is because it's specifically tailored towards SEND professionals like you. We're looking for people that are passionate about working with children with additional needs. And we're going to have schools that are specifically looking for recruitment teachers, teaching assistants, and SEND leaders as well. So this is going to be a great opportunity. So for those of you who haven't signed up for our event yet on the 18th of January, please click the QR code. That should take you to a form to fill in to register for the page, where our team will then shortlist and pre-screen as well. On the event, there'll be an opportunity to meet the schools. So we're expecting between 15 and 20 schools present at the event. They will do a quick 10-minute presentation. And why this is really important is because a lot of you who haven't worked in the Middle East before, I've spoken to many people, and they generally say, I want to work in Dubai. And there's nothing wrong with working in Dubai. I love Dubai. But there is so much more out there, really. And there's so many schools that have a lot to offer as well. So these 10-minute presentations are absolutely crucial to broaden your horizons to see what else is out there for you as well. On the 18th as well, we'll have live Q&As. So you'll have the opportunity to actually sit down with our school leaders and ask them questions. Ask them about what inclusion looks like within their organization. Ask them what the job opportunities that they've got as well. Then after the event, we'll then have direct interviews. So we'll have pre-arranged interviews leading up into the evening or afternoon as well. So why are we running this SEND Summit? So this is very passionate. Next slide, please. So this is very important to me. My son, George, was born 10 years ago, profoundly deaf. And since George was born, he really opened me up to the deaf community, but also into the SEND world as well. The importance of recruitment is crucial, but the importance of recruitment for SEND children is even more important. The importance of looking beyond the CV at the person, for the person who they bring to the table, not just about their credentials, is absolutely crucial. And for me, this is such a passionate thing. Now, George was he goes to a school in the UK. He's got an educational healthcare plan, and his needs are being met significantly well in the UK. So my preconceptions of inclusion within the Middle East, I didn't believe that George's needs could be met, but how I was so wrong. And I'm delighted that some of the panelists today actually convinced me otherwise. And I think this is one of the main reasons I've decided to put this webinar on today, because there is outstanding inclusive education happening right now in the Middle East. And I think it's so important that we're able to share this, and inclusion is specifically on the up. So next slide, please, Youssef. I'm going to start talking about who I'm delighted to be joined. So first up, we've got Margaret Mulholland. So Margaret is a global SEND advisor, and she's on our Transform Advisory Board, and she's a SEND guru. And I hope she won't mind me saying that as well. But she's somebody I look up to within the SEND world. And she's going to be talking in a second about what she has been doing within the SEM world as well. Margaret is also going to host the event, and so you don't have to listen to me all day as well. Next up, we'll then have Berna Bouwer. Berna is a corporate head of inclusion within GEMS Education. GEMS are a fantastic organization, and Berna's definitely got her work cut out there. But when I first met Berna, what was very clear and apparent was the passion for inclusion. And it was Berna who I first spoke to, who said, you need to come to the Middle East. Your son's needs will be met here significantly well. And how she was so right. We've then got Matt Campion. Matt is director of Reynard Academy, part of the Qatar Foundation in Qatar. Matt, I had the pleasure of speaking on a podcast with just before the Christmas period, and we talk about passion. I sat on this podcast with Matt, and I guarantee you, just speaking with Matt, you will be hooked and you'll be wanting to go and sign up with the Qatar Foundation. His passion is contagious. It's absolutely phenomenal, and I'm sure it'll be there. Then, last but not least, we've got Dr. Lilian Dogiama. So, Dr. Lilian is head of equality, diversity, and inclusion for Cambridge International. So, Cambridge International have recently become a partner with Transform. We're very proud to be partnering up with what they're doing there. Dr. Lilian will be talking about what inclusion looks like across the Cambridge International schools. So you'll be pleased to know that's me done, and I'm going to hand over to Margaret, who is going to start the event off in style. And Margaret, over to you. Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Mark, and absolutely delighted to be here, but delighted not only to be with the esteemed colleagues who are going to be speaking this evening, but just with the enthusiasm of having so many people on the call from all over the world. I mean, it's fantastic. And I think it really reflects an international shift in the way we think about our young people, the way we think about education. And as Mark has said, you know, his own personal experience has shown him that people not only care, but that the system is responding now much more effectively, both in England, internationally, and fantastically across the Middle East. And I think that for me is just, you know, I'm so delighted to be able to hear more from people this evening about their experiences rooted in schools across the Middle East. So I'm delighted to welcome you all, delighted to have been asked, and really just want to use the next 10 minutes to sort of frame a bit of thinking, I think. I mean, my own experience is as a policy director at the Association of School and College Leaders currently, but also I write for the Times Educational Supplement, and I've worked both in mainstream and in specialist settings, and I have valued the experience in both. And I think it's sometimes something we forget, that actually when we talk about inclusion, we're not just talking about inclusion being meaningful and important in mainstream settings, but also in specialist settings. We have to work really hard to achieve inclusion in specialist resource provisions, in specialist schools. So inclusion is something we're constantly working at. And as Mark said, I think there's a real championing of inclusion across the world at the moment, and I'm really delighted and excited about that. What I think's really valuable is when you're thinking about where you want to be and where you want to work, is thinking about culture. And we know that children with special educational needs thrive when they feel that they belong. So I think something important to be thinking about this evening in your heads as an audience is, in my current setting, how is belonging achieved? And when I'm listening to the speakers this evening, what are the drivers that they describe? What are the characteristics that support that sense of belonging? Now, when you're busy and you're listening to lots of different people, it's sometimes difficult to focus on key things. So I'm going to bring up a couple of slides, really because I think visuals help us think about inclusion. And I just want to bring up this. Can you see that, Mark? Okay, is that up? Yeah, brilliant. This is called the inclusion dots. Many of you might have seen it, but it's a visual representation of what we mean by inclusion. So we've been talking, haven't we, this evening so far about children with special educational needs, and we know that they would be described as students of determination across the Middle East, and I'm sure our colleagues this evening will tell us more about language and the use of language. But I think first and foremost, just thinking about what do we individually mean when we talk about inclusion? What are the things that come to mind for us? What are our predispositions, if you like, in thinking about inclusivity? And I think the inclusion dots are helpful because they help us think about our own personal beliefs, but also a system and individual schools, and recognize that everybody is in a state of flux constantly in how we experience inclusion. Because if our circumstances change, if the people around us change, if the building changes, if we change classroom, we move from the classroom to the corridor, our sense of inclusion shifts. And the inclusion dots help us sort of frame that. And here you see that the way it's represented, the coloured dots are those children with special educational needs, and the green dots are the perceived majority. So children without special educational needs. Now that's our first dilemma, because actually I think we're all seeing a real shift in the way we understand difference. And we're seeing that the numbers of children who might have an educational need of some kind, not just a special educational needs, but an educational needs of some kind, are growing significantly. So what I often think about is, rather than special educational needs or a label, people of determination, I would actually think about who are my vulnerable learners in my class and how do I accommodate their needs. And I like the inclusion dots from that perspective, because it allows you to just play with it and challenge it and think harder for this evening about who we're talking about. So it represents the way in which we sometimes group children in schools. Sometimes we'll have a resource provision that might be very integrated, or it might be quite segregated and separated. So we have different formations of settings and schools. And I think it's really important to recognise that the change we're seeing, both here where I'm based in England and also across the Middle East, with the different policy initiatives that have been developed over the last 10 years, is this shift from children who find learning hard being a minority who maybe are thought about as an afterthought, thought about once we've thought about the typical majority of learners. And we're now seeing those children being thought about first. And I think that's a phenomenal change in culture. But schools are on different stages of that journey. So if I go back, you know, schools in England, schools in Dubai, schools in Riyadh, they're all at different points on that trajectory journey. And when you're thinking about where I'm going to work, it's thinking about what contribution you can make to the development of that culture. And I think one of the fascinating things that we're seeing is not only are children who struggle to learn being brought in to be much more central to the culture of schools, but also recognizing that by helping children who struggle, we are really developing school improvement. And that might sound obvious, but actually, I think if you're working in England at the moment, if you're working in India, if you're working in the Middle East, you're actually experiencing that shift in different ways. So I think it's just thinking about those different changes and really also thinking about labels. So we'll, I'm sure, touch on that tonight, but we know so much more about children who are autistic, children who have maybe ADHD, but those labels only tell us so much. They can help us, but they can also limit us. You know, sometimes they can eclipse our view of the pupil in front of us. So when Mark very kindly called me a guru, the term guru or the term expert, my view is that I don't want to be an expert in ADHD or an expert in autism. What I really value is being an expert in the child sitting in front of me. So if you're nervous about applying for the program, for the, I don't know what we called it, Mark, but for the event, the conference, because you're not seeing yourself as an expert. Just think about how passionate you are and how much you value young people as the really important start point. Getting to know, being curious about young people and their journey is really important. We know now that labels don't really define young people. And I just wanted to show you this bit of research evidence, which I just think helps us reframe the way we think about schools at the moment, which is that we know so much more about how needs, and don't worry if you don't recognize all the labels, DLD being developmental language disorder or developmental coordination delay, DCD. Those overlaps are what's really interesting, is that young people are complicated, and complexity is something that we should say, do you know what? We're interested and excited in complexity. That's why we came into education, because actually we want to learn more about the children we teach. So I think what's valuable about tonight is hopefully an opportunity, or this morning, depending on where you are, is the opportunity to really explore the way in which schools can support us as individuals and support young people as unique individuals to really become part of a family and to develop and learn collaboratively. And that's the other thing that I see about the changes in the Middle East, is just how much investment in professional learning and collaborative learning is happening and how exciting that is. So I think that notion of the automatic doors is really important. You know, it says that it sends that message of what's good for young people who we might deem having complex needs. For those young people with special educational needs is good for everybody. So those little changes we make, those accessibility arrangements that we value, are really good for all. So I love that notion of the automatic doors. They're good for us, or the escalator. They help everybody, but they particularly help those who are finding access difficult. And I think it comes down to, as my final kind of slide, to just frame your thinking this evening. We often use images, don't we, to describe inclusivity. And you often see, is it the cricket pitch and the child looking over the fence with the boxes that they're standing on? That's a very well-known image. I like this image, which really pulls out the difference that I think we're really seeing in schools at the moment, which is that shift from just thinking it's not about just providing opportunities for young people, but it's about tailoring some of those opportunities to ensure that they meet the strengths of that young person and where they are in their learning. So I think thinking about inclusion as that ambition for equity rather than just equality of opportunity is something that I'm really excited to see in the schools across the Middle East and really being developed in such fantastic terms. So I'm going to stop there just because it was just a basis. Oh, that was the image, wasn't it, that I was showing you? And I've just got to find my capacity to come off screen there. Apologies. I'm off screen now. That's good. Yes, I've got the slides off. Brilliant. Fantastic. So I hope that's helpful in just sort of framing a few thoughts. And I'm now delighted to be able to hand over to the first of our speakers, and really excited to hear from Berna. Berna, welcome. And I'm going to pass over to you. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, as Mark said, we all have superheroes that we follow and heroes that we look up to, people that we model our practice on. And can I just say, Margaret, you are definitely one of my ultimate favorite people in inclusion. So thank you so much for that lovely introduction and everything that you said. I do have slides, only a few. It is one of those things that you get so passionate about. And I don't know how many of the people on the call actually know or have listened to David Bartram's work that he's done on inclusion. And he always starts with asking, about the number 1 million and what does that mean. And people always come up with all these ideas about how ones and zeros are different and how somebody stands outside and you know, it's a big number and those things. And then he says, it's the amount of time children on average spend in school from the moment they start school till the moment they finish their schooling. And when in the last 1 million minutes didn't each of us need some help? And that to me is the most beautiful explanation of what inclusion actually is. Inclusion is when we need it, it is there. So I am going to share a few slides with everybody. I had the opportunity to also speak at, sorry, I just need to get to the top one there. I had the opportunity to speak at guests. I don't actually know how to just share my, without the things on the left. But I wanted just to share that in Dubai at the moment in the UAE, we are around about 10 million people, of which 9 million people are expats. So what you sit with there is a huge amount of people coming from elsewhere in the world. And what makes the belonging and the community so beautiful is that we all are visitors in the UAE. And because the government has been so gracious in accepting all of our expats into the UAE, the biggest plan that we had to make was to cater to 200 different nationalities. And about 10 years ago, as Margaret said earlier, there was a huge shift in the world of inclusion in the UAE. I came to the UAE in 2009 from South Africa, and I had a young boy at that stage. He was 3 and with a cerebral palsy diagnosis, and I couldn't find a school for Joshua. And my journey in inclusion in the UAE started there. In South Africa, I was an educational psychologist, had a practice, but my youngest, there was just nothing available for him because he had this piece of paper, this diagnosis that actually said he is not able to do what other children can do in a mainstream school. And I went to the KHDA, which is the regulatory authority in Dubai for education, and spoke to a beautiful man called Hassan Mahmoud. And he said to me, but Berna, you're a teacher, go change the system from the inside. And I went back into my first love, which is teaching. But the point I'm trying to make is all through the journey of inclusion in the UAE and in Dubai, there were people who had felt the pain of not being included personally. So it is such a personal journey for all of us in the UAE. When the legislation came in to change the way we do inclusion, because I always also say that the UAE is one of the only countries in the world where not only is there a compliance element that is managed, run, checked in the UAE as part of the inspection framework. There's 47 items of compliance on the framework, but also there is a check in terms of quality of provision. So in the UAE, we have both. We have the compliance element. For instance, you cannot say no to a child who has any specific needs. You have to be very, very sure that you cannot provide. And those things. So there's so many things, but there's also the quality of provision. So a school gets rated on their inclusion. And what happens in the UAE is if a school's rating in inclusion isn't good or above, then there's serious consequences for the school and the school community in terms of how they are allowed to do school fees, how they are allowed to show their improvement and so forth. So yes, legislation is one of the things that's changed the game a lot in the UAE. One of the biggest things that we always look for in inclusion is also the multicultural aspect of it in the UAE. So we have the SEND piece. We don't really talk about SEND as in special needs. We talk about students of determination or people of determination, which I absolutely love. I know it's not for everybody, but if you have ever struggled with anything, you would know that it takes determination to actually get to the same point as everybody else. On average, we know that students with any specific need or difference takes at least 1.5 times longer than anybody else to get to the same point. So it's that determination that we're after. And the wonderful story about how we got to the term of people of determination is they asked the people what they wanted. And that's a beautiful thing about the UAE as well, is we have a say. So when we get into the cultural differences, if you have 200 nationalities, you have to be very, very careful when we talk about culture and what is acceptable. And most of our children in the UAE grow up as third culture kids. And that in itself is a specific need or a specific difference as well. I do want to just move on quickly and just share with you. So I've got the same picture as Margaret, but slightly different. But one of the big things is in the UAE and for GEMS education, I'm going to just talk about a little bit about what we do at GEMS. But in the UAE there's a vision, the 2021 to 2030 vision and goals. We've actually now established the 100 centenary goals as well. So for 2071, there's new goals that's been issued by the UAE government and the Ministry of Education, which is the overarching body. And then each of the Emirates, which are 7 of us, has their own knowledge and development authority that looks after education in the Emirate. But the most beautiful thing about it is last year was the year of tolerance in the UAE, and this year is the year of inclusion. And I'm hugely excited about this because it's inclusion on every level. It's not just students with specific needs or learning differences or students with language differences or multicultural or multilinguals. It's everything. It is into the sport, it's into the government levels, it's every single space you look at. And that makes it so hugely exciting to be in the Middle East at the moment, because the investment from the government is such that our schools are state of the art. There's a new ruling that's just come out that every school that has a swimming pool has to have a hoist. Isn't that just amazing? It's things that we don't even always think about. Being able to have a child in a wheelchair access school transport. You know, those are the things that if you don't need it, you won't know the issue with it. And then I also just would like to just quickly share what we do at GEMS Education. So at GEMS Education, we have 49 schools currently in the Middle East, of which 4 are in Egypt, 2 are in Qatar, and then the rest are in the UAE itself. 28 schools in Dubai. And every single school has at least 9% of our population as people of determination. Now, the national average in the UAE is currently, after the latest statistics came out, the open shared statistics came out, is about 7.8%. So we do know that there's a huge underdiagnosis currently going on, and more to do. There's always more to do. But in Dubai, for instance, of the 260 schools that are run in Dubai, only 28 of them are GEMS schools. And on the KHDA, the Knowledge and Development Authority's books, there is about 33,000 children of determination in our schools in the whole of the UAE. And of those 33,000 students of determination, just about 11,000 are in GEMS schools. So about 12% of the schools in the country are actually looking after about a third of our students of determination. And when we start talking about the success stories, the impact is just amazing. It's phenomenal because our students go around, they can't find school places because not all schools can cater for every child. But we've just had a young girl, very proud of her. About 11 years ago, I was at a school in Dubai, and this young girl had cerebral palsy in a wheelchair and she couldn't find a school. So we decided we are going to take her and we are going to provide whatever we can, the best we can. And June 2024, she wrote her A-levels and she's now studying journalism in the US, independently, still in her wheelchair, but independently. And that's the power of inclusion. I think you can't really be in inclusion if you are not able to feel it on your skin. In South Africa, we do have a saying that says, every mommy thinks her donkey is a racehorse. But when you're in inclusion, you see every child as a racehorse. So thank you so much for the time tonight. And I hope some of the things that I said resonated with people on the call. And if you ever have the opportunity to work in the Middle East, I can say there's no place in inclusion like the Middle East.
Wow, Berna, that's wonderfully uplifting. It really is. I loved some of those examples, particularly the example of the swimming pool having a hoist. I mean, Wow, just so important to be thinking in those terms every time we design a new space. Why are we not doing that? How can we still not be doing that across the world? Really important. So lovely. And I also didn't know about students of determination, the origin of that. That's fantastic, because again, I think very, very central to my thinking this year as we make our New Year's resolutions in 2025 is helping schools in England, for example, think about student voice more, because I think we've paid a lot of lip service to it, but we're not using it to galvanize change, and we're not using it to drive inclusion sufficiently yet, I say. So
And Margaret,
it's
I don't know if you heard Harrison Ford's speech the other night when he said, the new generation, they know what they want, and all we need to do is get out of their way. So let them tell us.
absolutely.
It's
Oh,
easy.
brilliant. I love that. Thank you. Well, really encouraging and inspiring. Thank you, Berna. And no pressure whatsoever, Matt, to come in and follow that one.
I think there's always a lot of pressure following Berna, and I really enjoyed listening to kind of Berna speak over the last year. I've got to know Berna on a personal and also professional level, and I really would echo everything that she's already shared here this evening. You know, the passion, the starting with the child and building everything actually from the child is the most kind of important thing, really. So really, thank you, Margaret, for having me here today, and Mark, and for the invitation to be a part of the panel. I'm just going to share my screen with you, so it may just take a few seconds just to share the screen. Hopefully, you'll be able to see.
Great. Thank you for joining us. And do I detect an accent there?
Yeah, so I was born in Manchester,
Oh,
but
close to me.
I worked the first 16 years of my career in special schools in the UK, and then moved over to Doha, Qatar in 2018. So I have the privilege of being the director of Renard Academy, which is part of the Qatar Foundation, and also the acting director of Wiref Academy, which is a new school that we are just about to open, which I'll mention in the next few minutes. And I also know that Kausa is in the audience here today, and she's a driving force as part of our Wiref team. So I just wanted to kind of mention her as well, because I know she's in the audience. Really, what I wanted to share really this evening or this morning, depending on where colleagues are, is just the journey in Qatar really, and where we are in terms of special educational needs. And I think being part of the Qatar Foundation is a real privilege. It's a real honour to be part of an organisation which truly values every child in all of our schools and every child across the whole country. So we have a real mission and vision, not only to meet the needs of our children and our families, but to meet the needs of children and families across the whole country and also within the region, really. So when I joined the foundation in 2018, we had elements within the foundation where we had specialised support services for children with special educational needs, but it was very much working in isolation. And then in 2022, August 2022, there was a shift in our organisation where there was a real push to bring as a collective all the elements of the special educational needs services within the Qatar Foundation, and the creation of what we can see on the screen here, which is what's termed for us as S4, which is the Special Schools and SEN Services. And that brings really forth all of the special needs services within our foundation. So if I just move on to my next slide, what this has done is really brought together the school services, the therapeutic services, every element around special educational needs. So we currently have, or we have had up until almost now, 2 schools in terms of special educational needs. So there's my academy, Renard Academy, and we support students who have a formal diagnosis of autism in the country. Outside Academy is a school for a range or supports the needs of a range of students with a range of special educational needs from pre-3 through to the end of grade 12. So approximately 650 students with a range of special educational needs. And then an exciting new project, and this is where, as Berna mentioned, working within the region is so exciting. Something that didn't exist but has now been built is Wiref Academy, which we will open to students next Sunday, actually, which will be the first school in the country for students with PMLD. So this is a setting which has never existed. So students with PMLD have never had the opportunity to access school provision in the country previously. And there's a real vision and a push from the Ministry of Education. So this is a Ministry of Education school, but they have asked us at Qatar Foundation to run this school. So we've spent the last 2 years working on the plans, working on how we can support the students. We appointed a wonderful team. So our staff team arrived in August. So we have approximately 55 staff who are amazing people. And I know you mentioned before, Margaret, about the people. What we look for the experience, but that's one element. It's the person, those actual personal qualities. And we have an amazing team of colleagues who will be opening YRF Academy to our students next Sunday. So we have our 3 schools, but what we have beyond that then are our special programs, and we're talking about inclusion here. So we have the LEAN program, which sits within the S4 portfolio. But what this is where we are utilising space within our mainstream schools. So within pre-university education, so within our foundation, we have 13 schools, and within those 11 schools which are not within the special school portfolio, we are opening classrooms where we can have our students placed with our staff, but then fully integrating into lessons with their mainstream peers. So accessing everything that their mainstream peers will actually access within our foundation's mainstream schools. We also have the Prime program, which is an afternoon and evening program. So again, thinking about students who have been through the system and maybe not for whatever reason, not reached that level that they need to. So students who have reached the end of grade 12 but not received their high school diploma have the opportunity to come back and work with us through the Prime program to achieve that, which then opens many, many doors for them moving forward. Encompassed within our SEN services is the safeguarding and wellbeing team. And that is not just for our special schools, that's for all of our schools. And again, has a much broader reach outside of the Qatar Foundation schools and really supports schools and families across the whole country, looking at safeguarding, having structures and systems to make sure that our children are safe and that their needs are always met, and also looking at the well-being of our students, but looking at the well-being of our families and also our staff teams. We also have the Learning Centre, which is our hub for our therapeutic services. So from the Learning Centre, we have an amazing team of speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, psychologists, autism specialists, who then go into all of our Qatar Foundation schools and support our students, whether they have a formal diagnosis or not. Again, we believe that every child has the right to access all the support that they need. We have the Darb Centre, which we opened in the last 2 years, which is, again, a therapeutic centre which sits beyond our foundation again. So provides services for the wider community. So parents, for families, can access that as a day service and an evening service, and ensure that their child is able to access therapeutic support, whether that be speech and language support, occupational therapy support, psychological support. And we also have the Ability Friendly program. So the Ability Friendly program is a sports program which has been developed, which again provides accessible and inclusive physical education for children and young adults across the whole country. And that's been a game changer. We have many children who've never accessed swimming before. I know that Berna mentioned about hoists. Again, not all of the pools here actually had hoists. They weren't always accessible. So our Ability Friendly team is working to ensure that everyone can access physical education. So the children and young adults who've accessed those services have really had the opportunity to engage in everything that their mainstream peers are also able to engage in. And then if I just take it over to the school level in terms of Renard and thinking about the process and the journey really. So Renard Academy opened in 2016 with 24 students in 4 classes. And at that time, and still is the only school in the country exclusively for those children with a formal diagnosis of autism. Provision prior to 2016 didn't formally exist. There were always children who were autistic, but many of those children had never accessed education previously, or were in education settings, but not able to be supported in the most appropriate way. So the school has really, really grown over these last 8 years. We're in our 9th year now. We've now moved on from 24 students with a total of 4 classes to 144 students across 5 campuses. 115 staff from an educational and a therapeutic viewpoint, representing over 30 nationalities. So we have colleagues from all over the world, again, with that passion for autism, that passion for special educational need to support the needs of our students. In our main campus in Renard, we have our elementary students, our elementary classes, so 12 classrooms completely full, between 6 and 10 students in each of those classes. Outage Academy, which I mentioned previously, have allocated some space for us because we are overflowing in terms of space. So our middle school of 4 classes are based there, and as I mentioned, we are utilising some of our mainstream settings, so integration and satellite classes in Sidra, in Al Wakra, and also Tariq bin Zayed. So really looking at making sure that our children have the opportunity to access a range of different settings, whichever is most appropriate in terms of meeting their needs, really. Our mission as a school. So again, as I mentioned, it's not just looking at our children, it's not just looking at our 144 families, it's looking at the needs of children and families within the country, the region and beyond. But our mission as a specialised autism school is to educate our students in the environment that is best suited to their needs, whilst implementing strategies that are researched to be effective. We always start with our child. What is the most appropriate way to meet the needs of our children? It's a real privilege to be the director of both schools and have the honour and privilege of being able to dream and think big and be backed by a foundation who want to dream and think big also, and provide those opportunities for all of our children. And starting with the child and looking at the ability of the child. So in our schools, we don't look at the disability. We don't look at what the child can't do. We look at their abilities. Our children are wonderful. Our children are unique. They have so many skills and talents and many things that they are able to actually do. So there's been a big shift in terms of the recognition of that within the country, certainly over the 6.5 years that I've been there. And then looking at our vision again, it's that broader vision to provide the best opportunities for people with autism to be valued and contribute, and also contributing members of their community. And a slight shift in terminology there, looking at people rather than children, because again, we are not just looking at our 144 children, it's the thousands of children, it's the thousands of families in the country. And how can we support our children? How can we support our families? How can we support all children and families? But equally, how can we prepare the community, the country to receive our children in the most appropriate way? And we do that in multiple different ways. So for us, very much a comprehensive approach, always for us, our students at the centre, at the core of everything that we do. Everything starts with our children. We're not trying to put our children into a box. We're not using labels around our children. We're not trying to offer only 3 pathways and think that's it. We start with our children. What is right for our children? That's what we look at. If it's not there, we make it happen. We go away, we work on that. We actually build those pathways. We build those opportunities. We work with the community. We work with our foundation to make sure that every child has access to everything they need. Around our child, we work very closely with the NAS back in the UK. So following very closely their SPELL framework around our positive interactions, the empathy, looking through the eyes of our children, the eyes of our families, creating that low arousal environment, links with the broader community, with other colleagues, with other entities, and having the structure there. And then sitting around that, we're looking at the qualities. The qualities there, that really comes into when we're talking about recruitment here, and we look at people. We always look at people's qualifications and their experience. Of course, that's one part of recruitment, but it's the person. We're looking for those right people, the people who are aspirational, who have high aspirations for all of our children, who are really committed, who want to be at our school, working in the field of special educational needs. It's in my mind, it's the best job in the world. It's such a privilege. But you have to want to actually be there. It's not a job that you can go into if you don't have that passion. Have the positivity, looking at the glass half full, and looking at the positives, analysing what are we doing and what are we able to actually do. The empathy is absolutely vital. Not making any assumptions, not making decisions on behalf of our children, on behalf of our families. Having having the empathy to look through the eyes of our children and our families and walk in their shoes. And collaboration, that's absolutely huge, whether it be within our school, within special education as a broader approach. The field of special educational needs is not a field that is competitive. It's pure collaboration. We are all open. I've never experienced in my career any form of competition. We always want to learn with each other, from each other, and improve as a broader team. And then looking very much around that comprehensive approach, how do we do this for all of our children? So again, starting with the child, the student-centered planning, the collaboration between the therapeutic and educational elements, so making sure we're meeting very much all the needs of our children, very much the holistic approach. Positive behaviour supports, very much view all behaviour as a form of communication. So in our schools, we don't apply any sanction-based approach. There's no negative consequences around behaviour. We are the adults. Our children are giving us a message through their behaviour. So very much looking at behaviour as all behaviour as a form of communication and understanding what the messaging is from our children. The structured supports, again, that will be different for every child, but making sure that those supports are there to meet the needs of our children. Family and community engagement is vital. This is a partnership. It can't work if that's not there. So working with our families, listening to our families, building relationships, building trust. Building trust takes time, and it's being invested in our families and not making judgments, listening, working with, being part of that journey. And that's a lifelong journey. So our commitment to our families won't end when our children leave our schools. We see this as a lifelong partnership. And the community engagement, working within a special educational setting, is really safe. That's a very safe environment. But we are preparing our children for the world that sits outside of those walls. So very much our approach is training the kind of broader community to develop awareness and understanding of autism, to make sure that our children can access a community that is ready to accept them and to understand them and to celebrate them for all the wonderful things that they do. Health and well-being for our children, for our families, for our staff is really important. A comprehensive and also a very diverse focus on our curriculum, and transition, inclusion, and also integration. So again, looking and thinking really carefully about what is the most appropriate way to support our children in every path and every change in their life. Again, I would say to any colleague who is thinking of moving into the kind of international world, then there is no better place to be right now than within this region, within the Middle East, because whether it be here in Doha, in Qatar, in the UAE, there are amazing people who have a passion for special educational needs. So I would really encourage anybody who's in the webinar tonight to really spend a bit of time looking into the provision and the schools and the organisations in the region. And please do feel free to reach out if you have any further questions. And I think that's everything that I had to share. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and I think you should be able to see me there. Thank you very much.
Matt, thank you. That was wonderful. And again, so inspiring. Really, I mean, genuinely, congratulations. How brilliant for us to hear about the opening of a PMLD specialist setting. It's just wonderful to hear. And I just added in the chat, profound and multiple learning difficulty. I know that some people may want to ask some questions about that a bit later, and about experience and expertise that's required, and it'd be brilliant to tap into your knowledge there. I tell you something else that really resonated with me. I was really taken with your use constantly of the term families. You know, you said our families. So there was a real implication that, you know, you continually talked about the community and the change to the community and meeting the needs of everybody, not just those children within your setting. But the fact that what it said to me was that when you take a child, you take the family as well.
Absolutely. And that's, as I said, that's in our eyes, that's very much a lifelong partnership. It's and building the trust for our families, especially for families whose child has maybe never accessed a school setting before. It's building trust, and that takes time. And I speak from my own experience. You know, this is my 7th year. It took a good year, a good 18 months, for the families to start to see, well, this is someone who's really invested in my child who won't just leave after 2 years, because in the international world, it can be quite very much a transitional world as well. So people do leave, and our families are looking for that constant, for people who are really going to be long-term invested in their children. But schools can't function on their own, and we can't make assumptions on behalf of our families. So the voice of our children is so important, but equally the voice of their parents and the broader family is absolutely vital.
That's really helpful. And I think also that notion of trust, trust in individuals and trust in the organisation is just really, it came through very strongly. Thank you so much. That's brilliant. I also, we'll come back to it later, but I think also the whole notion of, sports, accessibility more broadly, that ability-friendly sports, I mean, that's just going to have a resonating effect on the wider community continually. So it's wonderful to hear that. Thank you so much. Now, delighted to welcome Lilian to speak to us. Dr. Lilian, thank you for being with us, and it's really lovely to meet you and to hand over to you to tell us about Cambridge International Education and your role. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hi, Margaret. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I am beyond delighted to be here and join you at this wonderful webinar. I am profoundly inspired by the former speakers, so thank you so much. It was really nice to get to know you and the work that you're doing in your schools. So I'm very happy to have heard these talks before mine. So I'm going to give you a slightly different perspective coming from Cambridge International, which is part of Cambridge University Press and Assessment. And I'm going to give you the perspective from an educational organization that doesn't own schools, but we prepare the curriculum and the teaching and learning materials. So let me just share my screen quickly. And hopefully that should be coming through. Can you all see my screen? Yeah, perfect. Let me make it larger. Okay. Sorry, just rearranging all the windows here. Right. So just briefly, an introduction to Cambridge International and who we are. We're part of the University of Cambridge. As you can see, we're the little blue box there. Cambridge University Press and Assessment, which is the overall brand that we have, consists of 4 different product groups: the academic, the UK education, English, and international education, which I'm representing today. Within it, we also have Partnership for Education that works specifically with governments and international organizations worldwide for education reform. But generally speaking, international education, we offer schools around the world an innovative range of products and services that accompany a learner from the time that they're learning, the teacher as they're teaching, but also in the assessment. So we're both a publisher and an awarding body. And we cover the age range from 3-year-olds to 19-year-olds. So as you can see, there are many opportunities here for accessibility and to practice inclusive education. So in short, we have over 150 years of expertise and success in education, and specifically in assessment as well. We have offices in 80 different countries. Our headquarters are in Cambridge, in the UK. I am based in our Greece office, so I'm joining you today from Athens. And we work with 170 countries around the world, where we currently have in total 10,000 schools that currently teach the Cambridge Pathway, which is a globally trusted framework for high quality education for the entire range from 3 to 19-year-olds. So what is inclusive education at Cambridge? It's the kind of education that engages students in learning that is meaningful, relevant, and most importantly, accessible to all. So it's the view that every individual difference is embraced, and it's a source of diversity that can enrich our lives and learning of others. And how do we achieve that exactly? So inclusive education is going beyond what is the needs of SEND students. So we're going beyond just giving access to students with additional needs, but also, do we see them represented? Do we see the whole range of diversity of students represented in the teaching and learning materials and in the assessments? And if we do that successfully, then we will see students that learn in their own time, in their own way, and that means that eventually they thrive. So it's about access, participation, and then progress. And we do that by removing physical barriers. So that refers to where learning takes place, for instance, access to a building or to a resource or a website. Removing cultural barriers, and that's the what of learning. For example, are examples we use relevant? Are our instructions explicit and easily understood? And then by removing cognitive barriers, and that refers to how students learn. So do students assimilate, process, recall, and synthesize knowledge in the same way? Do they do that efficiently and effectively? And how do we allow for flexibility in terms of how students can demonstrate their learning? So you may have noticed that my job title has the acronym EDIB. So that stands for Equality, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging. And I just wanted briefly to give, my understanding of what these mean. So equality is a principle, the principle that everyone is treated in a fair and equal way and is given the same opportunities. Diversity is a fact. It's the fact that every human group consists of people with different identities and characteristics. And that's something we shouldn't just be tolerating, we should be accepting and celebrating even. Inclusion is the behavior. It's the behavior that welcomes everyone and creates a workplace and a classroom where everyone is respected and celebrated. And belonging, finally, is that abstract feeling that you feel safe, that you feel that this is your place, this is where you can learn, and this is where you can thrive. And below you can see a small selection of some of EDIB aspects or personal identities. So sometimes people ask me in the EDIB space, sometimes accessibility is, because it's not on the acronym, sometimes I get this question, is accessibility part of EDIB? And to that, I say resounding, absolutely yes. So as you know very well, it pertains to disability and neurodiversity, and 16% of the world population, and that's over 1 billion people, have a disability, whether that's a visible one or an invisible one. And some of them are our employees, my colleagues, and some of them are our customers, our learners. So it's within definitely our responsibility to make sure that our products and services are accessible to everyone. Some of the recently main drivers for accessibility in education are the ones that I've listed here. Of course, there's the ethical part of it. It's good that we need to do it, but beyond that, businesses also need different drivers. So we see compliance. Berna talked about compliance in the UAE, and I think that's a very positive driver for everyone, and it makes big educational organizations really look at accessibility because of that. But we also see an increased awareness globally. People are talking more about it. The stigma of having a disability or being neurodiverse is now removed, and it's replaced by knowledge. So we see an increased demand. Of course, our competitors, that's always a driving force when you're in the corporate world, in education as well. And then we see growth in assistive technologies, also aided by the flourish of AI. So what do we mean by accessibility in Cambridge International? So I've grouped it down to 4 different types of accessibility. So access arrangements is what we give our learners during the exams. So what does a student need in order to achieve their best results in an exam? What kind of barriers do we need to remove from the exam setting in order for every student, whether they have a disability or neurodiversity, can achieve the maximum? So that would include having modified papers or having regional adjustments during the examination. then contextual and linguistic accessibility is all about making our materials easy to understand. So we don't want the language or the context to be a barrier for any learner. So for instance, we use English in the Cambridge pathway, but our subjects, the subjects that we test are, they have a huge variety. So it could be maths, it could be physics, biology, history. So we're testing your knowledge in history. We're not testing your knowledge in English. So therefore, English shouldn't be a barrier in how you do in your history or in your maths exam. Then, of course, digital accessibility, which is very, very big at the moment. It's definitely mushrooming, and we see that, we have a lot more digital products now available for learners. So digital accessibility is a major area of improvement. And of course, print accessibility. So even the print textbooks the physical textbooks that you hold in your hand, how can you improve the design so that it's more accessible for students with dyslexia, for instance, or neurodiversity? But doing accessibility the right way is also a very, very complex issue. So here I've created a very bad diagram, admittedly. I even asked ChatGPT if it could give me a very complex diagram, and it didn't do a good job. So I had a stab at it myself. And on the left, you can see big groups of our products and services. And to the right, you can see the different types of accessibility. And in the middle, you see this, confusing array of arrows shooting all over the place. And then to the right of the types of accessibility, you see other arrows as well. So that is just to show you how complex it is, how all-pervasive it is, and how also one type of accessibility feeds into another or is a prerequisite for another type of accessibility. So that was the theory. Now we're coming to the practice of it, and I'd like to show you some of the examples, some of the opportunities we've had to do accessibility and inclusive education through our materials. So firstly, some examples from our curriculum development. When we're redeveloping a syllabus, and that happens on a rolling basis, so every few years, every syllabus comes up for redevelopment. And that's where we, look at it. Is it still relevant? What do we need to update? What kind of feedback did we get from our teachers, from our learners? So back to the drawing board, basically. So it's the perfect opportunity to embed accessibility and inclusion as well. So in our IGCSE music for 2026, we broadened the areas of study to include more diverse musical genres. And in the IGCSE Modern Foreign Languages redevelopment, we're focusing more on accessibility. And that also includes simplifying images and listening and reading papers. And then also in the history of Mauritius syllabus, we have been asked to include a chapter on enslavement, which has been critical in the history of the country. So examples both from inclusion and, talking about, difficult chapters of a country's history and accessibility as well. Within the space of language accessibility, as I mentioned before, it's really important for us, and we've got written guidelines that all of our, all of our assessment teams are following. But we've also developed recently the Accessible English Checker tool, and that's a tool that we use internally to make sure that the English language level that we're using is pitched at the right level for the qualification, but also it's easily accessible to students that don't have English as their first language. So again, in this effort to write in plain English so that it's easily understood and it doesn't become a hindrance to how our pupils are learning. Another good example of what we've been doing recently is the AS level physical education. So the team have improved access arrangements for candidates with particular assessment needs. And the new syllabus will now include goalball, which is a sport for people with low vision or blindness. And as you can see in the photograph, it's played with these eye shades. We collaborated with a charity called Campsites and Goalball UK to understand also, how the game is played, obviously, and the requirements, and then how do you incorporate that and make it available through our syllabus. And we're now very happy to say that from the next couple of years, I think we're going to be including that in the new PE syllabus. A couple of examples now from our teaching and learning resources, which is basically what we call our textbooks. I mentioned print accessibility before. So that's basically making the physical textbooks accessible. And we do that by improving the design templates. So the team went back to the drawing boards, they got themselves trained up, and they made all these fast changes in the design templates that we use to produce our textbooks. So some of the changes include color contrast, left alignment of the text, structured headings, anchored images, alternative text, and so on. And that also enables the digital conversion of the physical book when it is transformed into an ebook. That means that that part of accessibility is also transferred, carried through to the digital version. Cambridge Latin course is a very successful course that we provide the textbooks for. We've worked on it with a team of academics from our university. And in this new edition of it, the fifth edition, we're really trying to represent the true diversity of the ancient Roman world. So in it, you will see storylines that have women represented, people of color, different social classes, people with disabilities, and other marginalized groups. Also, we're being very careful in not romanticizing and glorifying, the ancient Roman society. So we have sections in those which we call cultural background sections, where we explore Roman history and we explore issues such as enslavement and imperialism. And in addition to that, we also have teacher resources online where we help teachers embed diversity and inclusion in the classroom as they teach the Latin course. And you can see some of the headings: accessibility, classroom culture and challenging conversation, lesson plans, equity in assessment, trauma-informed teaching, and then specific blog posts as well. Digital accessibility. So as I said, driven by compliance recently, there's a new legislation that is coming up in the EU, the European Accessibility Act, and it's coming into effect next year. It's been a very positive driver for us, and we're trying to get everything ready for next year, because our commitment is that all our new products will be fully accessible and compliant with the requirements of the EAA and the WCAG 2.2 universal standards by this year. I'm still not used to it being 2025. And we're also looking at how we can leverage AI to accelerate the improvements that we make in digital accessibility. So just in closing, if you wanted to keep up to date with the work that we're doing, we've recently published several web pages on the work that we're doing on accessibility, SEND and access arrangements, and also getting started with inclusive education, our very successful guides. I can post the links here, or when I make available the slide deck, you will have the links as well. And just a closing remark, just before the festive break, I was very lucky to visit the UAE. I was in Dubai doing some school visits with colleagues. Also, I was in Saudi as well. And I had the opportunity to talk to teachers there and head of inclusion as well. And I'm really now trying to formulate a new plan on how we can help teachers with SEND and specifically with inclusion in the schools. So what I'm saying is, stay tuned. There will be more to share. Thank you so much.
Liliana, thank you. I mean, brilliant note for us to come together on, that kind of stay tuned, because those resources, I mean, that last page be really valuable for people who are looking to do an application, who are worrying about, which some of the things in the chat reflect, sort of use of language and how to make sure that the way they're framing both their experience and their ambition is appropriate. So I think that's a fantastic platform for people to look at. I mean, the breadth of the work that you're doing makes me very excited for Transform International to be working collaboratively with Cambridge Education. That's just fantastic. So thank you so much. And the thing that I particularly valued personally there, the talk about accessibility in all those different aspects and domains, if you like, I think is also really important for the individuals listening to be thinking about how they sort of QA their own experiences. You know, how accessible am I in the way I talk to people? How accessible is my support, my experience? How accessible is the classroom I lead at the moment? How accessible am I to parents? It's such a valuable way of us framing our own strengths, if you like, in relation to inclusivity. So yeah, thank you so much, Lilian. And that was fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
a really rich, wasn't it, Mark? Valuable evening. Thank you. Shall I hand over to you to just say a few words and reflect? Because it's been phenomenal and I know you must be bursting.
I mean, wow, 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 wow. I mean, if people aren't inspired to go and work within inclusion in the Middle East right now, then wow. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, I can't believe we brought all of you guys together and we've achieved everything that we wanted to. And I think my preconception that inclusion doesn't exist in the Middle East is completely way off. I mean, oh my goodness, what you guys are doing is absolutely incredible. And I feel so inspired. And I hope that everybody on this call feels so inspired to come along on the 18th. Yusuf, can you share the QR code again so we can get that up? I hope you feel inspired to come along. If you want to apply to any of the schools that are here today, we will have the opportunity to do so. Each school are going to have their very own web page on our website where you'll be able to apply directly to each school as well. Just to talk about the SEND Recruitment Summit, what I will say is the event is on the 18th of January and it will be 12 p.m. until 3 p.m. in the UAE. However, on the 13th of January, we've decided to run a separate event, which will be same time as this, so 8 p.m. UAE, 4 o'clock UK, where it's going to be a Meet the Schools. And we're going to run that separately because we're expecting quite a few schools to be present at this event. And these schools are specifically looking for SEND specialists like yourselves. So come along to the 13th, Meet the Schools. We will record that if you can't make it, and we will send those out as well. But on the 18th, there'll be live Q&A opportunities to go into the schools. And then, as I said to you before, every single candidate that's selected to come to our event, and we're going to make this an event that's anybody that's placeable. We will then put your details on a live portal, which our schools will be able to have access to. You will be able to request interviews with our schools, and schools will be able to request interviews with you. We will try and pre-arrange as many of the interviews as possible. And on the day, schools will be interviewing all the way up as well. So these are going to be live vacancies for the next academic year. So it's super, super exciting. So if you haven't done so already, let's scan the QR code on the screen and that will take you to a live page there. So I know a lot of you have got we've been on for quite some time, but it's been quite valuable. But I do want to open up some questions. And if you haven't done so already, do ask some questions in the Q&A box. Margaret, you and I are going to try and manage this and ask the panel if that's okay. Should we leave that QR code on, Yusuf? What do you think? So, and then we can kind of talk in the background, just in case. So, Margaret, I don't know if you want me to kind of run some the questions, and you can be part of this in terms of asking. Panel, I'll open it up to all of you. If that's okay. So I've got the question box here. So if I start reading, I'm sorry if I can't get all of your questions answered, but I'll try and get through as many as I possibly can. So we've got a question here. First off the question box is Husna. I'm very interested in this area at the moment. I'm working in an SEMH school recently. However, my question is, though, I have 20 years plus experience in mainstream. I want to know the qualification I can work towards that I can take to you that would be a merit and would stand out, and I really like to invest in this if viable. If any of the panel would like to answer that question? Berna.
So the experience you already have sounds absolutely amazing, and we are all teachers first. And I think that needs to be said first and foremost. The current most done qualification and looked for qualification is the NPQSL, where we have it's the old SENCO qualification. So many of the schools are looking for somebody that's either doing this, the senior SL senior leadership or the SEN 1 in the NPQH range. So it might be best practice, or it might be prime education. There's so many different companies who actually do it. And if you are in the UK, you can have a look on the DFE's website, and they can actually list all of the companies who do these qualifications. The second thing I want to say is that any short course that you do, anything that you do that actually gives you more breadth in terms of your knowledge and working with SEN counts in your favor.
Would anyone like to add to that? Or Matt?
Please, Mark, if I can just really, I would just echo what was already been said by Berna. The kind of MPQ, different qualifications, is something that schools really look out for. There is still the SENCO award, which is there. And again, just a qualification in the field of special educational needs that you are maybe looking at. So again, if I look at, in terms of my school, any practice around autism, any training around autism would certainly make somebody stand out. But again, I please don't feel that not having a strong SEN background would stop you from moving into the SEN field. We've all taken that leap at some point. I was a mainstream teacher myself, and a school kind of took a chance on me because of my mainstream background. So it's you know, we work with a very, very diverse range of students. So I think if you have that passion, any additional training is always valuable, but your passion for SEN is the thing that will really, really come through in an application.
Amazing. Anyone else to add anything there? Okay, I'm going to move on. There is from an anonymous attendee. I'm an experienced trained ESL English teacher. However, I don't have any exclusive SEN experience. I was wondering, can I still apply for SEN jobs? Matt, it's quite similar to what you've just said.
Yeah, I just kind of echo both mine and also Berna's previous answers, that yes, you can do that. It's in any application. Again, it's referencing your experience in terms of SEN, but again, you're passionate about why you want to work in the field of special educational needs, and that would make you stand out in any of these applications.
Perfect.
And remember that the multilingual field, especially in the UAE, is huge. As I said, 200 different nationalities. So ESL actually adds a lot of value. It's actually two different things. And if you look at the new inclusion framework that the government has just published, inclusion or SEN is one strand, and then EAL or ELL or SEL is a different strand. So you definitely should apply.
Brilliant. Okay, Shadrach, I'm a physical education teacher with more than 15 years multicultural school in Kenya. I have been teaching IGCSE, but would like to work in the Middle East. Are there opportunities for PE teachers specifically of the area of special educational needs in sport? If yes, what such schools can apply for in the Middle East? Anyone want to take that one?
Again, yeah, I'm happy to go in there. I mean, we in our schools, in our special schools, that we have specialist PE teachers in all of our special schools, and I referenced the ability friendly team that we have within Qatar Foundation earlier as well, which are kind of PE teachers and PE coaches, And I know not only in our schools, that in other schools across the region, that specialist PE teachers are really sought for. So absolutely, I would say have a look at the schools that are out there that are advertising, and absolutely make an application.
And also remember, we have the whole of the Special Olympics UAE brand in the Middle East as well. So there's also, if schools per se is not the area that you want to look at, there's more than just school and being a PE teacher. I can say there's nothing like just being a teacher, but I can say that the UAE has got a huge focus on through the unified games and unified sports. So if you ever have time to look at that, look it up and see what the unified games and unified sports is about. It's all run through the Special Olympics, which is different from the Paralympics, but there's definitely a huge market in terms of PE specialism in SEN, as Matt said.
Brilliant. Here's a question that nobody's written. It's from myself actually for the team to answer if possible. But I think it might be quite relevant for the audience that we have still at the moment. If somebody is very passionate about working within inclusion, is not a qualified teacher, but wants to be a learning support assistant, how can they do this? Is it possible to do so within your organization, or how is it structured at the moment?
I'm just going to jump in there. It's absolutely possible. In the UAE at the moment, learning support assistants or learning support specialists, as I like to refer to them, do not actually need a qualification in terms of teaching qualification. You do need certain, like the TAs, you would need certain minimum qualification in terms of schooling. But your experience is actually what would count towards that. And what we do at James Education, we do have support in terms of getting you qualifications should you be in the system already. And let's say, for instance, we have many LSAs or people who start as LSAs and end up as fully qualified teachers in our schools. I've got quite a few examples of where people started out as a TA and then ended up as a vice principal or assistant head of school. So it is absolutely possible, and there is pathways through our schools and James Education where you can actually get through those qualifications yourself through the system. In the UAE, if you do want to be a head of inclusion, which is legislated again, you have to have a SENCO qualification or equivalency. But you can be an SEN teacher or work in the inclusion department with any teaching qualification. So you could be a PE teacher or a music teacher and be part of the inclusion team. It's not an issue.
Matt, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, very much as already been shared by Berna there, it would follow the same in terms of the structure. The only thing in the country in Doha is for a learning support kind of position, you would have to physically be in the country here. It wouldn't attract sponsorship within the actual country. So you would need to be in the country first and foremost to be able to apply for any of those positions.
And Berna or Dr. Lilian or Matt, do we know what the rest of the GCC has? Because there seems to be different rules for a lot of the countries. So the UAE seems a bit more open. Qatar can only take local hires. What's it like for Saudi and Bahrain and Kuwait, etc.?
I can talk about Egypt, Bahrain, and then we have dipped our toes in Saudi a little bit. And it often depends on the amount of years of experience you have and the type of experience you have. So although there are minimum qualifications, there is a lot of scope to get your foot in the door. Should you have different qualifications or different a route, your route might be different, and that's absolutely fine as well. There's also in the UAE currently a program to support people of determination to find jobs. So there's a huge focus on people with disabilities or neurodiversity. And if you are a candidate with anything like that, for instance, there is the right support to also not only place you in the right area of provision, but also support you through your journey.
Brilliant. I've got questions coming in thick and fast, guys, so I'm going to try and speed up as much as I can. Is it common for schools to hire teachers for positions such as art teachers without prior experience with a special educational needs teacher? Similar sort of answer to the ones we've had before. But guys, you want to add anything to what you've already said? No? Okay, let's talk
So I was just I think it just echoes previous answers. Again, if you have the qualification, if you're an art teacher, we can provide the PD around the special educational needs, around those elements. So if you're a qualified teacher with a specialist subject and a passion for special educational needs, then the PD is available to be able to support that kind of further development, really.
Perfect. And I'm just reading through some of these questions. Here we go. I have a master's in special educational needs. I have both mainstream and special school experience. I have almost 10 years experience as a teacher and have done different teacher training programs. I would love to be part of these incredible teaching programs. So it wasn't a question, it was more of a statement, really, which was good. Are there any opportunities in Saudi Arabia? So, Saudi Arabia, I don't know, Dr. Lilian, I don't know if you've had any contacts in Saudi.
I can't speak surely about what the legislation is in Saudi, but I did meet inclusion teachers in my school visits there. But I'm not sure what the provision is, what the state does there exactly. I'm really sorry. I wish I could be of more help.
No problem. Okay, I'm studying MPQ Senko right now, and I have 11 years experience working in special educational needs. But when approaching an interview, I get stressed and nervous. Any tips? Oh, that's a good one for the panel to answer. I'm going to open up to all four of you to come up with some different tips, please. Start with
I
you,
would
Matt.
say prepare. And when you think you've done a lot of preparation, prepare some more. I always think that the better, your answers are organized, the less stressful you'll feel during the interview. I mean, these days you can work with, OpenAI with AI tools and just anticipate, what are the 10 most common interview questions that I can be asked, and then start thinking about your answers. I always say that it's good to pull up your CV and like deconstruct it. Think about, what did I do in that job? What specific traits did I have to show? What specific characteristics? Who did I work with? And then pull these examples out, make a bullet point list for yourself, because we do all of these amazing things and then we totally forget about them because years pass and life moves on. So in your preparation, go down memory lane, work memory lane, and remember exactly what you did, which students did you work with, specific examples that you can bring up in your interview.
I would also say, I think that's really good advice. And I would also say, rehearse. If you're nervous, walk it through, do it, rehearse it, action it, because then it's so much less daunting once you do it in real time, because you've already gone through and you've heard it in your own head first. And I think that's one of the things that sometimes when you're anxious, you avoid doing that. And it's actually the most helpful strategy once you've done, as Lilian said, that real solid prep and really being able to pull out your own lived experiences to align with the characteristics that you think the organization is looking to see enabled.
So what I can also add there is I absolutely agree, but what I also can add is there's a secret to this. We're all nervous in interviews. So be honest. If you walk into an interview and you are nervous, it's okay to say, guys, I'm really nervous about this, because that honesty, that vulnerability, there's nothing wrong with it. And oftentimes when you are in inclusion, we feel it, we know you're nervous, but being honest about it, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. That's the first thing. The second thing I'd like to say is link it to your own stories. An interview is nothing more than you telling your story. And the moment you link it to your own experiences and it becomes real, it becomes your truth, it's easier to say what you want to say.
Absolutely. I would really echo that. Having those personal experiences, the real life things that you've lived, that passion is so important. And in the interview, don't be afraid to pause and take a moment to think and to gather your thoughts. You don't have to react and respond straight away. So it's okay to take a little bit of time to process and think of the most appropriate response.
I would say as well, I mean, that's bang on. If you've got several years experience within the SEN world, then it's definitely going to be something you can draw upon your own experience there. Answering every question, no matter what the question is, with your experience just kind of makes it more valuable. It gives it more meat to that answer as well. So I agree with that 100%. Okay, we're going to take 2 more questions, I think, because I think they're still coming in thick and fast, and I think some are still very similar to the others. I'm going to go with, okay. I have over 5 years experience as an SEN teacher in Egypt. Would you advise which countries are more likely to offer sponsorship opportunities for educators in the field, enabling work and residency?
So I can say that if you speak Arabic and you've had GCSE experience, you are more likely to be appointed in certain roles in the UAE. Absolutely. In terms of sponsorships, we do offer international contracts as well as local contracts, but I think you have to just be careful in terms of residency and residency permits. So the time that you spend in the UAE, you've got a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract. There is now also the beautiful 10-year golden visa that some teachers can apply for. But just keep in mind that some things in the UAE are very, very expensive. So for instance, living cost is quite high. So when you go into a role into the UAE, and I can only speak for the UAE, please do make sure that you negotiate the housing and the accommodation that is offered to all our teachers on international contracts. So please make sure that you speak to people, research those things, because part of your contract in terms of international schools in the UAE is accommodation, school placements, as well as remuneration. So do make sure that you know what you're asking for, and just make sure that it's market related as well when you get your contract, whether you work for James or Talim or whichever company that you approach, just make sure that it's market relatable.
I'm going to close the Q&A there because I think it's been phenomenal to have you guys out. I'm just going to have a quick plug. If everyone goes on to the chat box, Youssef has very kindly, Youssef, can you just repost them so they're at the bottom. So just before Christmas, I had the very pleasure of sitting down with Matt, and I had the pleasure of sitting down with Margaret in 2 podcasts. Our podcast is called Beyond the CV, and we talk about inclusion within the Middle East specifically. So if you want to hear more from our panelists, specifically from Matt and from Margaret, do log in to watch these podcasts, because they really dive into a lot, and they're really an interesting watch and a listen, really. So watch those. But Margaret, would you like to have any closing statements or comments before we let everyone leave?
Just to say thank you to everybody. I mean, really enjoyed and feel I've learned a huge amount from our speakers this evening, but also from our audience whose questions were really insightful. I feel I'm getting a stronger insight into the opportunities across the Middle East. So thank you, everybody. It's been a real pleasure to join you this evening. Huge thanks. And thanks to you, Mark, for putting it on. It's been a really useful session.
Thank you so much. Well, do you know what? We achieved everything that we wanted to achieve today. I hope we've inspired many of you to apply to come to our event on the 18th of January. As I said, it's going to be the first of its kind, and specifically recruiting for special educational needs for you who you're passionate at working with children with additional needs. So we're super excited here. I can't believe that we've brought you all together, and thank you so much for your time once again. But for now, I think good night or good day wherever you are in the world, and thank you again for joining, and we will see you next week for the 13th, going on to the 18th. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.